This is the Perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah!
If you want to earn more, your team has to learn more.
Well, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Micah, and with me, as usual, the legendary Matthew Jarvis. What's going on, bud?
Oh, Micah, just living the dream. I'm here at my house in Las Vegas as we record this. I can see that you're in your home office up in Anchorage, Alaska. And so it's fun, these wonders of technology that we can do this stuff and from other parts of the world.
You know, it really is. It's kind of amazing as we all see. But one of the things, Jarvis, as technology continues to push us in and kind of distance our communication, we can still communicate in real time. We can still do this. It's really important to still say in your team, what is a solid communication policy? What is a solid policies you need to have inside of your office to make sure you're building that virtual team? So again, our technology, we can have team members all the way across the world and work with them. But how are we making sure we have that camaraderie? Because my team members that aren't in Alaska, when I'm in my Anchorage office and I pop out of my office and I go grab a cup of water, I'm kind of chit-chatting with them, or a cup of coffee, right? I'm talking with them and kind of going through a little bit. But our virtual team members don't get that. Mm-hmm. So if you're building a displaced workforce, you have to be intentional about these things. How do you make up for those? So I know one example for us is that kind of chit-chat happens 5 minutes before video meetings. So then that way our distant team, local teams can log online 5 minutes before a meeting. They can do a little fun chit chat with things before the meeting starts, but meetings always still have to start on time.
Yeah, I like that. I learned that from you, and we've started doing that in a lot of our meetings, right? So, and I love this idea of, hey, the meeting's going to start. The other thing I think, Micah, that happens, if you say, hey, the meeting starts at 9 and we're going to spend the first 5 or 10 minutes chit-chatting, then everybody knows the first 5 or 10 minutes aren't important, and it sort of encourages coming late. So we say, hey, if you want to chit-chat, come early. That's awesome. I'll be there early. We can chit-chat. And then at 9 o'clock sharp, we're jumping straight into business. Mike, the other thing that comes out to me with virtual teams, and you and I have virtual teams all over the world, literally all over the world, is that when you have a virtual team, you've got to watch some things a little bit closer, because when I go into my physical office and I have my physical team, there's things I can notice. I can say, oh, you know, there aren't fresh flowers this week. That means that the checklist wasn't followed. That means what other checklists aren't followed. It lets me kind of keep a pulse on what's going on. When you have a virtual team, you have to find a way to have that pulse because you're not going to notice the fresh flowers not being there.
Yeah, so a good one on the virtual team, right, is, you know, looking at their dress. You know, cameras come on. Cameras are mandatory in meetings. And so are they still in quasi pajamas? And no, none of my team members show up in pajamas, but are they not really dressed for work? Even though you're virtual, you still need to be dressed for work, right? We still need to have these things in place. So when they start slipping in those areas, it can become a question, what other areas are we slipping in? Is this not serious, right? Now, you could think it's something really small. And you could say, you know what, Micah, so what? They didn't wear a collared shirt. They're wearing a t-shirt. They're still getting the same work done. Are they? Are they? So clothes don't matter in client. Well, okay. Well, I didn't say that. Okay. We'll go say, so clothes do matter. Okay. So then what type of clothes matter, right? Everything counts across the board. So if we're going to show up with our B game, what type of output are we really expecting? And it's the same thing with our virtual employees. If you were in our office, we have a dress code. Why wouldn't we have one for our virtual team members as well?
Yeah, something I want to draw out from that as well, Micah, is, you know, someone can say, hey, listen, that doesn't matter. They're still getting their work done. Are they getting their work done?
Great
right.
question.
So especially when I meet with small business owners, and I've been guilty of this at times as well, is that, oh, the work's all getting done. Cool. Can you point to a number? Like, let's quantify that. All right, the building hasn't burned down. That is one measurement, though you're virtual, so you wouldn't know if the building had burned down. Or how many CRM appointments have been made? How many tasks have been completed? How many client communications? And so it's easy, and we've talked about this a lot, Micah, when we're talking about our financials. It's easy for us to tell ourselves stories about our teams. Hey, everything's getting done. I'm sure if they needed training, they would ask. I'm sure if they had problems, they would let me know. I'm sure if the systems had broke down, they would say something. But as my old friend says, you get what you inspect, not what you expect. So if you're not inspecting things and really quantifiably inspecting them, don't kid yourself that everything is fine, right? You really need to dive in there and take a look.
And Jarvis, that leads us to a solid point here, right, about team training. Because this is one of those areas that is saying, you know what, my team is doing a great job. We really don't need training. Or they've done the same thing for a long time. They're an expert in it. We really don't need to sharpen their skills in this. And really what I've seen over time is when we've done something a long time, sure, we may be good at it, but we've trimmed out to just what we want to do. Now, sometimes that's not everything we should be doing. What I see with team members aren't always pushing for efficiency. Now, I'm not ragging on my team. I have a fantastic team. I love them.
Yes.
I think they're really good. But one of the things that makes them really good is that they can do tasks repetitively, they can get them done, and they can follow a process. But where we differ a little bit is I'm always looking at it saying, how do I make this task more effective? Not necessarily more efficient, but how do I make this task more effective with everybody's time? And so when we introduce team training, it gives us a permission to reevaluate certain things for the team members to say, hey, how should we tweak things? How should we do it? And it helps become their ideas because it's now a new team training. Now they get to look at it with a different lens versus it being forced top down.
Yeah, and this, maybe I'm the only one that struggles with this, but we also have to remember that our team members are still human beings, right? Like they have good days and they have bad days and they remember things and they forget things and we're drawn to apathy, right? Like nature just kind of takes everything to apathy. Like that's going to, or atrophy, not apathy. I'm sorry, atrophy.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. The things are going to kind of devolve, and all of us, advisors, team members, everyone, we need that constant push. As our good friend Joe Lucas always says, right? Comfort is the cancer of greatness. And we create these really effective offices, and in ways they do get really comfortable, and it can become a cancer to our greatness. And so team training is one of the best ways to keep a team that's striving for excellence, not the status quo, right? The status quo is when I walk into the Department of Motor Vehicles and I have to take a line, the whole thing, that's status quo, right? Like that's the minimal viable product. What we want is every time a team member walks in, every time a client walks in, they're like, wow, you guys really went next level. I thought you had it set before. It's next level now.
Well, that status quo, I'm starting to push back on that one. That's a status quo when it's a government mandate that you must do something, and this is the only service that can provide that, right? Because now you see like UMVs popping up where they're now trying to get around that system and make it a little bit more. So we got to be pushing that. So Jarvis, this really comes into this next question about why is team training a must, right? One of the things you and I are big at is consistently working with our teams and doing training, whether it's us or someone else. But why is this just a must?
Boy, how could it not be a must? There's a lot of reasons. One, I think for me personally, it forces me to get involved with the team. It forces me to look what they're doing. It's easy for me to kind of just stay focused in my lane and say, hey, as the advisor, here's what I'm doing. Here's the personal and professional development I'm doing. Everything's good. So one of the benefits for team training, one reason it's a must, is it forces me to look in there and say, all right, tell me what you're working on. Tell me where you're struggling. Tell me where you're having success. And let's work on that together. Let's really be a team and not just four individuals that are kind of marching in a similar direction. Micah, what's a must for you there?
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely a must for me on this one is it forces me to spend time with the team in a positive way, right? Yes. So I don't mean force in a negative way, but it creates an opportunity for me to spend time as the team where we're all working on a common goal together. And why this is important is I'm very easy to jump off on my little silo. You go do your stuff. I don't want you to tell me how I'm going to do my job, so I'm not going to tell you how to do yours. I'm going to step over here and just get my thing done. You get your thing done. And I would be a little bit more recluse in that aspect of things. I just would. And I magically hope everyone gets their job done, and then it doesn't. Then I have to get out of this little bubble and go fix other issues. But when we're doing team training, it's constantly putting us in a room together so we can flush out other hidden issues that we didn't see. And that's one of the things we always kick off our team training with. There's a certain format that's really successful, but we're always going to go through a little bit of goal setting. Then we're going to start flushing out their questions. And those questions are so important because, Jarvis, sometimes there's questions, there's objections, there's concerns that they have that I didn't realize were out there, right? Because we're at different stages in our career. And it gives us an opportunity to connect a little bit more and say, yeah, we're all human. Guess what? We all have that head trash. And someone volunteers, hey, I'm really concerned about this. And someone's like, yeah, actually, I'm actually concerned about the same things. So yeah, we actually all have that same head trash, right? You're not alone in this. Great. How do we deal with this?
Yeah, it is really, really critical when those concerns come up that you have to honor those, and you have to really take that Tim Ferriss fear-setting approach, right? So if I'm dismissive, if I go to the team, and in fact, this week we're going to be having a team training as we do every month, and one of the things we talk about is how will the billing go for the next quarter? So always debrief on the quarter and then kind of look forward for billing value adds for the next quarter, right? And if a team member says, hey, listen, I'm concerned that we don't have the system in place for the next value add, and I say, don't worry about it, we've got it, that hasn't helped the situation, right? Even if it's clear in my mind. So I want to take that as a chance.
Are you talking about spousal communications or team? What are you talking about here?
Right? There's some similarities there. But I want, if they say, hey, I'm worried we're going to not get those out on time. Cool. What would we need to do for you to be comfortable? Now, this is a balancing act, right? Because I still have the responsibility of making those decisions. If the team says, hey, what we need is 6 weeks to prepare these. Well, that might be a little much. How about we add one extra day of quality control the week before? How about that? Okay. But when concerns come up, we write them on the board and we honor those. But again, the responsibility lays with me to prioritize and make decisions.
Absolutely. Now, Jarvis, one of the things that comes up when I'm talking to other advisors about team training is excuses, because we all have them, why can't you do team training? It's number one, we don't have enough time. Well, you're going to lie about other things as well. So,
I'm sorry. Anytime someone says they don't have enough time, like, you're going to be kidding me, right? Elon Musk is putting people on Mars and building electric cars, and you don't have enough time. In fact, I was just, what was it? Oh, I was reading a Zig Ziglar. I've been big on Zig Ziglar lately. And he had a thing about if you spend 10 minutes a day, if you waste 10 minutes a day, which that's not hard to do. That's about like, one glance at social media. 10 minutes a day for a whole year is 60 hours, which is about a week and a half of work week. So 10 minutes a day. So you tell me, hey, I don't have time, baloney. But Micah, please, sorry, back to like
60 hours. That's got to be like 4 average person's work weeks, by the way, but whatever.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
How are we defining work?
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't have enough time, right? I hear that. And we're looking at the wrong thing. So you got to create an environment where your team wants training, right? And this comes from a leadership perspective down. You do have to honor the fact that they're concerned with their time. So how is this going to make it better? And you got to help them build it in their schedule. So kind of like their perfect week concept. Jarvis, another one that it's kind of the same thing, but it's, we're already so busy, or we do more than anyone else. Why do we really need training?
I'm sorry. There's some of these excuses that come out that are such victim language, because even if it were objectively true, and it's not, but even if it were objectively, why take that mindset? Mike, another thing that stands out to me with this team training is in the book Drive by Daniel Pink. He says that once you cover sanitation issues with employees, like having a desk to work at and decent pay, it boils down to autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That's what drives people, right? And so having these team trainings, it allows us to help us become masters of what we do, and it reestablishes the purpose of what we're doing. As advisors, we can maybe sometimes see that better. Like, hey, I'm meeting with a client, I'm in that meeting, and I see the change it made in their life, and I see the advice that we're giving them. An operations person, RM person, they may not see that. And so these meetings are also a chance to help them see the purpose, like what you're doing is essential to the organization. And if you do it a little bit better than I do it better, than we all do it better, then clients' lives are transformed. And it seems silly to say, hey, using the Calendly link is transforming lives, but it is.
Yeah, all of these things matter, right? Everything counts, so everything helps in that transforming the live standpoint. And you, as the leader of your team, really have to be kind of setting this up as the example as how this makes one. Now, back to the Daniel Pink thing, if you're helping someone with mastery, you're also helping them with autonomy, because now you can set up ground rules for kind of where are they able to operate independently and be successful. And also define what autonomy is. That's the one in my team that I get a lot of it. Where am I going to get some autonomy with this? You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means, right? So it's a great time to like flush out definitions from team members. What would it take for to make you feel like you're autonomous in this task, right? Or where you have control of this, or where you have a mastery inside of this. So don't take your definitions on these things, and that's really challenging for me. But I got to take my team members' definitions on these things, okay? Let me hear it from you and say, okay, great, now we're going to go through this. Jarvis, I see your scowl on your face. The reason I got a problem with the definitions, there should only be one definition of a word, but whatever.
Yes.
That's a different
No, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I was scowling because I was sort of thinking through it. I'm like, oh, that's right. There is this, like everything exists on a spectrum, right? And autonomy does as well, right? I don't want to have to get involved with what you're doing. At the same time, I have to be able to see the results that you're generating, right? So I'm just like running through scenarios. I completely agree with you. Micah, something else comes up when you're doing team training is this temptation to just lecture your team. Now, there is a place for that. And there is a place to say, hey, this is how it's done, and this is non-negotiable. But far more effective in most cases is what we like to call a guided discovery, where it's a back and forth. When watch the advisor training that we just did, right? We spent a lot of time saying, hey, we were talking about retirement income timeline. What questions do you have? What objections do you have? When are you nervous coming into this? And what I found interesting on that, Micah, and again, members can go back and watch that recording, is that a lot of the team members had a similar concern. And it was a concern that you and I had just never run into because we've done these so many times. And it was a great time to stop and say, oh, that's interesting. If all three of you are having this concern, how do we adjust the system to accommodate that? And that something that would not have come out if we had just said, oh, here's how it's done.
Yeah, because this is about making them better at their jobs, right? Giving them that mastery concept of it. So it's really hearing that head trash, hearing those concerns, being able to flush those things out. And one of the things when we design the training too, Jarvis, is this is not my favorite task that I have to do,
It's
right?
not,
But
no.
I enjoy it. So it's a bit of a dichotomy with me. So we got to set the training up where it's going to be a win. If I'm going in there saying, why the hell don't you guys know what the frick you're freaking doing? This is what I'm getting paying you for. Why do I got to train you on these things, right? And I have a very negative attitude. That's not going to go over so well. But this is a team environment. And you know what? I didn't know everything. I still don't know everything, right? Especially in where I was at the time in my career. And this is an opportunity we get to come together. Now, one of the things that I've realized, at least in my training, is that when I'm training multiple people, it's a better environment for me than one-on-one training. So I don't do a whole lot of one-on-one training unless it's a really short session. If it's a longer session, one-on-one, it just taken a little too long for me. So one of my many limitations. And so we had to structure the training with this. This is great. How do we do one-to-many training with our team? Let's bring all of our team members in at once and let's go through this. Now, you may not have a large team, so that may not apply to you. The example still holds true. The training has to work where you're excited to do it and to work with your team. That was the end goal. That's the tweak I had to make. What's the tweak you need to make sure you're excited about training?
Yeah, that's a great example, Micah. When I'm doing our annual team trainings or our offsite team trainings, to do a team training for an entire day, that's usually beyond like my energy. Not that I can't do it, but it's not really my favorite thing. And so I typically bring in a facilitator for that because that keeps the energy high. Now, we could do a whole sidebar on this. If you're bringing in a facilitator for training, you need to make sure that you're, on the same page. I've had some of those go really well. I've had some of them go not as well, right? It adds an element of risk. Either way, whether you're doing an all-day team training or just your once a week or once a month training, just like going into a prospect meeting or a client meeting, I need to make sure I'm in the right headspace going into that. So what I don't want to do is be running from 100 tasks and putting out 10 fires to run into that room and then try to run that meeting, virtual or not. I need to take that 15 minutes ahead of time, clear my head, make sure I'm in a productive space, not a let's burn this thing down. I'm in a productive space and I'm going in saying, hey, my team needs this to better support me, to better support clients. And for this to be a win-win-win, I've got to go in the right headspace.
Now, this is where I'm going to come to dress with it as well, right? What's the dress code for these training? If it's an on-site training in the office, guess what? It's suit and tie. I am showing up to deliver my A game. I'm not showing up to B game. Now, if we're having a retreat and maybe we're going to Alaska, we're going skiing, we're going mountain biking, something else, okay, the dress code can differ a little bit, but I am still dressing up for those events. Why? Because I want to get in the zone and dress matters with this. Now, Jarvis, to your point, this is something that you can partially delegate, right? You could bring in a facilitator. You could send team members out, like the Ritz-Carlton training. Yeah. We had team members go to the Black Swan training.
That's right,
which is Never Split the Difference guy, right? His name is escaping me, but anyways, great book.
Chris Voss.
That's it. Good job. Chris Voss. So we had team members go to there. A couple things when you're going to partially delegate the training. Now, why do I say partially? Because this is not a full delegation. A full delegation is great. Go book ABC for an appointment, and then you don't do anything else and it all gets done. Partial delegation, you got to help guide them through this training, right? So an example is we let people know in advance. Well, number one, we encourage team members to go get training. They have a training budget, and we have to constantly push them to go use and fill that budget to go and do things. Then when they agree to do the training, then we got to set them up for expectations. Great news, when you come back, you're going to be presenting to the entire team what you learned, right? So here's ways to do that. Here are action items that you need to think about. Here's questions you need to ask. What head trust do you have? How do you want to mingle? Where are you going to stay, right? So this isn't something, again, this isn't a full delegation. This is a partial delegation. Someone else is doing the training, but I still got to work with all the prep work with them to make sure this is a success. Because if I just send them to a $4,000 Ritz-Carlton training, they stay at the Ritz-Carlton, they have a great time, and they come back like, oh my gosh, the Ritz-Carlton is really nice. They do a good job. And nothing happens, that was a waste of a lot of money. So I need to set this up for success on the back end, that they're bringing back those action items that our team can implement.
One of the best things I've seen and that we've done, Micah, you and I, for this with team members, we do this ourselves, by the way, and you alluded to this briefly, I just want to pull it out a little bit more, which is have them go with a specific question or a specific problem to solve, right? So they're going to learn all sorts of interesting things, but make sure, so I would sit down and say, hey, while you're there, ask everyone you meet, how do you handle this? Ask the trainers, ask the other people who attend, how are you handling this specific situation? And see if you can get 2 or 3 ideas, and when you come back, let's work on implementing those. So yeah, you really need to set them up for success. The default, which is why most people aren't very successful, is I'm just going to go. I'm going to sit in the back of the room. I'm going to go ahead and have drinks with everybody. I'm going to come back and just go back to work. And that was cute. That was fun. That's not going to take you to the next level.
No, it's not. And we got to help our team get there. So, all right, Jarvis, another thing to be thinking about is where do you break your team training up, right? Number one, we have all team training. We're bringing the entire team in. Now, this could be something like we're going to go over one element of the CRM, not the entire CRM, but what's one element of the CRM that just one team member really uses in a powerhouse? And how do we empower them to teach the rest of our team? For example, came to our scope that we saw that one team member was really the resource for running all reports out of the CRM. While all team members had access to that.
Who is that, by the way, just so when I need to
exactly. It was Sierra.
Okay.
Sierra is the
That makes
powerhouse.
sense, yes.
Yeah, so she does a great job in running reports out of the CRM. And what we found out is whenever someone needed to run a report, they would go to Sierra and Sierra would help them build it, right? Which is fantastic. Sierra loves to help out. She's a great team member. But this is an area that we could say, hey, if only one member knows how to really run this as a powerhouse, this is a training opportunity. So we had Sierra lead a team training on how to better powerhouse and utilize reports. And it went over really well. So Jarvis, this is a CRM we've been using for a long time. The team knows it, but just like any other technology, you're using 5, maybe 10% of it. You're not using the whole thing. What's the one element, the one teeny little element that you could talk about and do training just about that?
Yeah, and it's an interesting dichotomy on team training versus pod training, right? RMs, ops, or individual training, because there are things that we want the entire team to learn from each other. We need to work as a team. There are also, and I see this run into team meetings, and I'm always kind of hyper aware of it. If we're going to sidebar, so what I would discover, here's an example, is we would have our team meeting, and then the advisors would sidebar on something that wasn't really relevant to anybody else. And it was wasting everybody, not just wasting everyone else's time. It's really kind of an energy draining thing where you're like, I have work I need to do, and I'm just sitting here listening to you two talk, and there's nothing I can contribute. And so one of the things that I'm really diligent about is having a notepad. So if we have something that comes up that's not relevant for the entire team, I'll say, great, let me write that down, and then let's stay for 10 minutes, or we'll stay after this, or we'll schedule another time to dive into this advisor only or ops only, so that it does get covered and does get honored, but it's not going to burn up the entire team's time for something that's not relevant to the team.
I love it. So let's talk about frequency of training, right? How frequently should you be doing training with your team? Now, we have an entire onboarding process when we have a new team member, and it takes a couple of weeks. We have a lot of pre-recorded training. We've already done it. We've documented it, et cetera. So when a new team member comes in, they can kind of get the base of everything. But we also don't want to be doing daily training kind of after that, right? That's a bit much to go through. So the cadence that we're on now, Jarvis, is kind of twice a month. We're doing once a month an all team training for 90 minutes, 2 hours, somewhere in there, where the entire team comes together and we do a training on some element. Like I gave an example of CRM. And then another time once a month is what we're doing is pod training. So we're breaking it up by advisors, RM, ops, trading executives, et cetera. So then that way, it's, again, if an advisors have a certain question or ops have a certain question, it's not derailing the entire team. It's like, hey, let's let the ops people get together and really run through this piece. And again, we're rotating who's in charge of the training. We're giving everyone an opportunity to go through. And this really helps elevate the bar. It has two things with it. And when you're rotating who's training, number one is you're elevating the bar because every team member is like, holy crap, I really got to pay attention to do this and to go through it. But the second byproduct of that, they know now when I'm presenting or when they're presenting, and they're looking at a bunch of deadpan faces and people not paying attention, what an impact that really makes, right? True. And so now like, wow, I need to be a better participant. I need to be a better listener in these trainings because, man, being on the receiving end of that is not a lot of fun.
I also want to pull out of that, Micah, and I love that insight. I want to pull out of that as well, that this is team training and team improvement. This isn't let's read through the CRM at the 37 tasks that are outstanding. Now, every once in a while, there's a place for that when the tasks aren't getting done, but the team training is about improving. So it's about resetting expectations, right? Just as a reminder, this is how we do things. This is why we do things. And then here's how we're going to take this to the next level. And you've got to cover that whole spectrum. Here's what we do, here's why we do it, and here's how we're going to improve it. Again, using our surge checklist, right? Here's why we have fresh flowers. Here's why we have the dress code. And then we go and say, all right, here's how we're going to improve this. This time we're going to have a little bit nicer paper. We're going to set the office up a little bit different. One thing, Micah, that we're going to do this next mini surge is have all the meetings transcribed. We're experimenting with an AI transcription service. And so we're going to have all the meetings transcribed. So we're going to talk to as a team, All right, how is this experience going to be for the clients? How are we going to articulate this? What are we going to do with the information? How are we going to evaluate success? And so those are great topics for team meetings. Going through and reading the 37 emails that are still sitting unresolved, that's more of a one-on-one, or that's more of a correction versus a training.
Well, that's a great question for you, Jarvis. So how are you going to take the transcription? How are you going to find action notes out of those? Or is the advisor just going to have to write the actions separately outside of that? And then you're going to have to kind of follow up with those. What's that process going to look like?
Yeah, we're going to be using it this week, the week that this is going out. And so I'm still going to take my same notes as I always do. And I'm going to do my same dictation as I always do, because I never want to rely on a new system when it's mission critical, right? So I'm gonna do everything the same, and then we're gonna see how we've been playing with these transcriptions to see if it's in fact grabbing the action items, or what change in policy do we need to have so that it can capture all of them. So it'll be interesting to see. It's a way to, to try new things without breaking what already works, right? We have a system that works. We always want a chance to improve it, but we don't want to throw it out just because I found something shiny.
Boy, makes me a little nervous. I'm glad you're doing it. This is great.
I'll let you know. Never mind that recording bug in the corner of your office.
I know, right? All right. So this podcast is all about action items, not just our AI overlords. So let's, Jarvis, jump into here and talk about some action items that our listeners can implement this week's. And I'm going to kick it off with number one and say schedule team training.
Schedule it. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you have the topic, you don't have the topic, I don't care. Go out within the next 45, 60 days, schedule a block of team training that you're going to do.
Yeah, and we do ours every month, and we typically do it in connection with mini surge, either before or after. That way it has a place to live, right? And you just have to force that into the calendar, because if you're waiting until it feels like a good time to do team training, it's like everything else. It's just not going to happen. Action item number 2, I would say plug your team members into training. This can be something high-end, like attending the Ritz-Carlton training or the Black Swan training or strategic coaches training for team members, or I don't want to say conferences. There are not very many conferences that are worth sending team members to, but get them plugged into training. It can be an online class. It can be a book that you're going to read together as a team, whatever the case may be. You need to get your team plugged into training so that they're doing next level. And of course, for our Backstage Pass and Invictus members, we have a lot of that recorded training on the website as well.
I would also say, Jarvis, is you got to get this set up with you got to get this set up for success. And so what I'm going to mean by that is you got to have an evaluation form coming back from your team members as to what they liked about this, right? And I like this from twofold. Number one, if I'm getting my team members to evaluate it, and they're saying 4 or 5 stars out of 5, right? And they're saying it's great training. When we get the next couple ones scheduled, they're like, oh man, I'm getting a little busy. We still have another team training. I'm like, yeah, but the last 4 trainings you scheduled it as 5 stars. You thought it was phenomenal. Why would we stop doing that? Right? And they're like, okay, great. It is a good reason to keep doing it. But the second reason, if they come back, we actually got some really good feedback when we first started this with our team members, which was, how could we make this better? And they're like, here's a couple things that we thought we were missing that made it harder for us to pay attention in the training. For example, Jarvis, you and I have an outline that we did, and the team members was like, we'd really like a copy of that outline so we can see where we're going with.
Of course.
What a duh.
Yeah, duh. Right? Yeah, here we're hiding it like this is ours. You can't see it.
Yeah, but it was just like, this is what Jarvis and I are going to talk about, right? So like low IQ stuff that Jarvis and I totally missed as we were kind of putting something together for team members. So it's like, well, of course, this isn't stuff we're hiding from them. There's more things we'll talk about, but going through that so then they could write their own notes on these things of how things are kind of broken down. So little things like that to improve the training, get the feedback, get those evals back from your team members.
Yeah, and I love the mindset of how can we improve this, right? I just have zero tolerance or zero interest in sitting around and saying, hey, what was bad about this? Like, let's all sit around and complain about it. No interest, but hey, what could we do better? Or your example earlier, Micah, hey, when you teach this, like, how are you going to teach it differently, right? All of those things, that's really great. Well, as always, podcast listeners, we thank you for downloading the podcast and most importantly, transforming your practice. It's really been our mission these last, Mike, it's coming on 5 years and over 1.5 million downloads to transform the industry. And we are seeing the entire industry move. And as you're looking to transform your practice, team trainings is a foundational element of that. So remember to give the podcast 5 stars, share it on social media, have your team listen to it. And until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.